Hello and welcome to The Zach Brown Show, the show that introduces you to old friends for the first time. I'm your host, Zach Brown. On this episode, our friend Breanna Riddell returns to discuss what happens when things don't go the way you expected and what to do next. Stay tuned for more right after this.
Come with us to a tropical getaway like no other. At Babambaboo Bay, all your vacation dreams go beyond anything you dare imagine.
Is that a good thing?
See exotic wildlife.
Huh. That's awesome.
At Babambaboo Bay, you can charter a deep-sea fishing excursion.
This feels wrong.
Personal cabanas featuring luxurious amenities.
That is the biggest possum I have ever seen.
When the sun goes down, things really begin to heat up. Dine by moonlight at Enrile's Hibachi.
My eyebrows are gone!
And dance until the morning to the soulful sounds of Papa Luvi and the Clumpy Bunch. Let your stress melt away as you swim in the crystal clear waters of Babambaboo Bay.
Babambaboo Bay?
Babambaboo Bay.
Baba Ganoush. Babambaboo Bay? No. Yes? No.
Babambaboo Bay.
All right.
All right. Babambaboo Bay. A vacation like no other.
Well, Beebs. Well, I'm calling you Beebs, but they don't know you're Beebs. Anyway, Breanna, welcome back to the show.
Most people don't know me, Beebs.
Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I'm starting to do this. I didn't think that I'd be doing this already in my podcasting journey, but I'm kind of doing these little check-ins with past guests, and I'm enjoying having friends back on and sitting and catching up. So the last we heard from you, you had moved to Denver, made this huge life-changing jump. And I felt that was a super encouraging story because it was like this leap of faith move. This didn't see it coming, but then took the chance. And that really, I felt, was inspiring to people. I actually had people tell me that they found it inspiring. So thank you for the initial chat. But
there's always a but.
life often changes and seasons of life happen. So if you could, we'll unpack this a little bit, but give me a life update in our friends here, the listeners.
Sure. Life update is about a year ago. I moved back to Pensacola, Florida, back to my home, and kind of left ministry full time. I still do it on the side, but I left it full time and bought a house really close to my family, completely started a random new job I've never done before. And I'm kind of thriving in that new kind of sense of restarting almost, but back home. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think so many times we're the Instagram generation, right? Like everything is this perfect little square and it's got a beautiful filter, and somebody travels or they go somewhere and they have this amazing meal and they post this thing and you just go, wow, look at their life. That's incredible. But then we'll see these other posts where it's like, here's the success story. This person is 25 years old and they invested in this thing and they're this smash sensation. But nobody ever hears what happens after that. Do they stay a sensation? Do they stay, well off? Does something go radically wrong? You would hope not, but sometimes it does. And I think so many people, you hear these stories that are inspiring and you either are inspired to go do something, or you hear this story and think that can never happen for me. And then let's take it another step. Maybe it does happen to them and things don't work out the way they thought they were going to. Not that it's not good, but it just, the leap of faith, the step shifted. And I think there's this stigma that's surrounding that might be, it's definitely imposed on us. It's like, oh, that's embarrassing. It didn't work out. Or, I made this deal that I was making this move and it was this whole thing. And then I had to come back, or think like there's a redirect. And I really think that's unfair. And that it's very unhealthy. So I really wanted you to come back and just share, your story and what's been going on the last year, and just hopefully encourage someone that maybe things didn't work out the way they thought, but that's okay. You know what I mean? That can be a launch pad, an arrow gets drawn back to be launched forward, even stronger. So, explain to your comfort level kind of what went on in Denver and what brought you back.
Sure. I'm like laughing because there's just, as life tends to be, it's usually a lot. Like when it rains, it pours, so it's just, I don't know where to start fully. But I think last we talked, I had been called to Denver, and I really, really believe to this day that was the Lord. There's not even a question. It was God, and it was everything I said before. Like, it was a huge leap of faith. It was a big moment in my faith journey for me, to abandon everything and follow that voice. I will say that I think sometimes even in my own head, I'm guilty of thinking that when God does something absolutely like almost spiritually magnificent, that means the rest of the journey is going to be like that. Mm-hmm. It's almost as if like when he takes us to the mountaintop, we're supposed to stay there. But I'm all like immediately reminded of stories of like Moses, where God takes Moses to the mountaintop. And what does Moses immediately have to do when he's done? Go right back down to the valley where the people are. And you see that a lot in scripture, like God will take you to these mountaintops, but don't stay there very long, because the whole point of the mountaintop is to go back down to the valley. And so Denver kind of was a mountaintop experience at the beginning. Literally. Literally, yes, that turned into a valley experience pretty fast, and unexpectedly so, I will say. I was not prepared emotionally, spiritually, or mentally for what would go on both inside of the church and outside of the church. And just because I don't know how to say this the right way, I'll just say that there were some things that happened repeatedly over a long period of time there that really damaged me, spiritually and emotionally, and mentally. Just a lot of like almost unfair and unnecessary trials were put in my direction that I had to walk through. I don't mean to be so dodgy. It's just like, how do you communicate trauma in a way that isn't like gossip or, I don't know. Essentially, the environment became very toxic and very abusive for me personally, the church that I was working at and just the environment I was in. And really, 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 I lost my sense of self in the pursuit of doing the thing God wanted. I lost completely who I was in him. So the irony of that is like, you go where God calls you, but if you go where God calls you and you're not in the place that you need to be with God, it doesn't really matter, right? Like God has got to be the most important thing always, no matter where you are. And I had lost sight of that because of the things I was surrounded by. My eyes shifted focus from God to the things around me, and it just really destroyed me. And I struggled, and I've had a lot of struggles, but this kind of struggle was something I had not experienced. I had not recognized that I had experienced before. And so it was really, really tough for me, just working through what I know God says that I am and who God says that I am versus what these people that I'm pouring so much of my trust and like faith into are saying about me. And these people supposedly love God too. It was just like it was like a conflicting battle for me. And it got to the point where I just up and quit my job out of nowhere. After about 2 years of doing it, which was a pretty big deal. And then, I thought I was going to stay in Denver. I really loved where I lived, and I loved what was happening there for me, just not spiritually or emotionally, but just like personally. I just loved the environment. And but then there was this tragic death in our family, and I went home for a funeral. And it was then that I was like, I just really felt like God was saying, I need you to come home. I need you to be with your family, and I need you to heal now. Like, now is the time for healing. 3 years ago, it was the time for going, but now it's the time for healing. And having to make that transition, like, absolutely, you feel like a failure sometimes,
I walked with you as my friend through so much of this season of life. And, when you're rooting for someone in a situation that's kind of scary, but they're doing everything they can to, soldier on and stay rooted and grounded. And, it was right about the time when I feel like you had gotten over the I'm lonely and this is scary to, okay, cool. This is where I'm going to be. Right at that pivot is when all of a sudden things got really ugly, unfortunately.
Yes. And I think, to be honest with you, I think it was ugly almost from the beginning, but I was so focused on being uncomfortable. It wasn't until I was comfortable that I was like, oh no, something else is going on. Like when you get in a car accident and you hurt your head and you hurt your back and you hurt your leg or whatever, you're going to feel the worst thing first. And once that's taken care of, you're like, oh, wait a minute, like this also hurts. And that's kind of what happened, because you're right. When I was there for like the first year and a half, I was like, oh, this is new. I don't know anybody. I'm freaking out. I don't know what my normal routine is. And then I got it. And then it was like, oh, wait a minute. Hold on. There's some other stuff going on here,
Yeah. And, all this is going on in the midst of the pressure cooker that is 2020. Everything was amplified. The highs were the highest, the lows were the lowest. Nothing made sense. And so I feel like as the world, we really all truly found out who we really are, because we found out what we can do without. We found out that we're stronger than we think that we are. We're smarter. We're more ingenuitive. I think that's a word. Anyway, the fact that we have survived, we've made it through, but unfortunately the ugly things that were buried under the surface really were kind of forced to the top. But what's amazing about the human experience is that sometimes something from the outside can look like, oh, that was a failure. That didn't work out. Like you went to go do this thing and it didn't happen. And now you came back, which is a pitiful way of looking at another person or even yourself. But I think the thing that, because I know you as my friend, is that, you took lessons from this. You took strengths, and your new trajectory on life will never be the same because of the experiences that you had on the mountaintop. That now that you're in the valley, or you've gone to a valley and kind of working your way back up, you have new lessons, and you've been there and done that. And you've gleaned wisdom from that time.
Oh, absolutely. To be honest with you, because like, I don't want to paint a picture that's not real. I feel like so many times in podcasts or in interviews, people are like, oh, like it was tough, but God's good and I'm happy. Like I'm still like, to this very second, I still have days where I am like super angry at God, and I'm in counseling, which I never thought I would do again. There's a lot of things I'm doing. Like, it's not like it's just like this magic button where I was like, I don't feel like a failure anymore, or everything's fine. Like it is absolutely a brutal process to be refined. And the thing I've learned too is that sometimes God refines you, even if that like wasn't his original intention. And what I mean by that is like, I believe that God is not surprised by anything that happens. But I also believe that God's intention for us is not always what happens either, because of our own choices or because of other people's choices. Yeah. And I think God's intention for what happened in Denver may not be what happened like in actuality. However, I know that God, and I cling to the scripture that talks about how God makes all things good, right? Like that song Graves in the Gardens. I know it's probably so overplayed and whatever, but the message is very beautiful in the sense that like that is very much what God does, is he takes the things that we break and he does make them beautiful. So I can learn these, like you're saying, have wisdom from these experiences and apply them to like, okay, this is what I know now. And this is how my perspective has changed. I can see the beauty, but also still struggle with that pain and that like that brokenness that exists, because I think a lot of people think that both can exist at the same time, but they very, very much can. I can still see and glean wisdom and still be angry like that, like I can still wrestle with that tension.
And I think any of our friends who know you, know that you were a lion-hearted woman, and, you took your licks, but you didn't let it keep you down. You got up, and I really feel that's so key. We're going to get beat up so much in this life, but you have to keep getting up and striving towards the goal. Maybe it's a brand new goal, but as long as you're getting up and moving forward. So, you had to make that really hard decision to come back. And unfortunately, it was again this tragedy that was kind of the catalyst that caused you to see that you needed to return home for a time of healing, but also to be close to your family. But you never let it keep you down. You may still feel frustrated and lonely or things like, because that's natural and that's human. And so many people feel that and probably discount it and think that, oh, I'm just, I'm anxious or I'm emotional. And it's like, no, that's a valid feeling.
Yeah.
But we must continue on. So I applaud you, my friend, for just continuing on and pressing towards new goals and new ventures and things that you didn't ever think you'd be a part of.
Well, and I'll give a shout out here to my mother, Sandy Riddell. I don't know if she's ever going to listen to this podcast or not, and I'll give a shout out to parents in general here, because I think that a lot of people do not realize the major impact a parent has on a child's perspective of life and their motivation to either keep going or not go at all.
Mm-hmm.
And, I attribute my ability to get up and lick my wounds to the fact that my mother has taught me to do that her whole life. And obviously God is a huge proponent of that as well. But I think parents, the way that you equip and challenge your children for life in general, it plays out. If you're hearing this and you're a parent and you're I don't know if I'm doing anything for my child, I'm almost 27 and I'm still reaping the benefits of my mother instilling in me to never give up. And so I think, having a support system is so important, because there are days, Zach, where I still don't feel like I want to get up and do anything, there are still days when I don't want to lick the wounds and move forward, it's a tough process, and learning how to love God, when you don't feel like it has been, I feel like the theme of my entire life. How could a good God let this happen? You have to go back to the people who tell you the scriptural truths every day in your face, and they remind you, this is who God is, and you need people to do that. I cannot get up on my own. There's just no way, and people like you and people like my friend Rachel, and I could not get up. I could not keep moving if it wasn't for people like you guys, we need people. It's just a fact.
Yeah. I mean, that's what this podcast is all about, is people's stories and hearing their experiences. And maybe you find yourself going, oh man, I totally understand that. But maybe it's the opposite. And you feel like, man, this is so far from me, but I have a new understanding of something that this person's gone through. And maybe that gives you some more compassion or empathy towards other humans and making your time traveling on this earth a little better, because we're all just seeing that we're really all just trying our best. And we all have fears, we all have hopes, and we really want them to work out. And sometimes you have to take a second leap of faith. You know what I mean? Leaving Denver after taking the initial leap of faith to go back to Pensacola was another leap. You didn't see, because when you left Pensacola, there were some hurts there. There were some things that didn't work out. And it was the idea of going back. You're like, well, this sucks. I don't want to have to do this.
And I've had just being totally transparent again, I've had a really hard time being back here a second time. It's been completely different than when I was here before I left. And that's been a huge adjustment also, life for people in towns that they never leave from kind of stays the same. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. It just is what it is. You can't really grow without new experiences. But when you come back with all of these new experiences and you try to fit them in an old box, it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit anymore. And I've kind of burned unintentionally, and not even burned it. There hasn't been any fallouts, but I've just let relationships kind of waste away, because who I am now, it can't fit in a box anymore with them, if that makes any sense. It's just been a huge adjustment overall.
Hang on for a second. We got something to tell you. I love coffee. It's part of my morning routine. Without it, I just don't feel like myself. Allow me to introduce you to the official coffee of The Zach Brown Show. Located in Columbia, Tennessee, Oak Hill Farm Coffee Roasters offers a delicious variety of roasts and blends. Every bag of coffee you buy will help mission and humanitarian projects all around the world. What's better than a cup of coffee? A cup of coffee that helped make a difference. Oak Hill Farm Coffee Roasters. Wake up, drink coffee, and go do something great.
I think one silly thing, not a silly thing, but even your time in Denver, you bought and renovated an old house. I mean, the amount of skills that you learned just in doing that and coming back.
And then I did it again here.
Right. And being a young person, you learned all these skills and you built equity, and then you're able to bring it back to where you are. And again, you're like, okay, if for anything else, I don't ever believe God is, a single faceted being, that everything has so many reasons that they happen. So there's just that. It's a little aside.
And my master's, I literally finished my master's in Denver, and I promise you I would not have finished my master's had it not been for my friend Rachel that I met in Denver. I was so done it. I was like, I'm not doing it. And she was like, no, you're going to sit down and you're going to write all night. So even that, I don't even know if I'd have a master's if I hadn't moved to Denver. So
shout out to Rachel. You're the MVP of this podcast.
Shout out to Rachel.
So you move back. You're going through the full range of emotions. For anybody that's ever left someplace and either gone back to visit or to move back, that feeling. It's strange. It's almost a little surreal because you're like, this is familiar, but it's different. Or maybe it's familiar and just I'm different. Like you're saying, you are bigger. You've experienced more things, and all of your new things don't fit in the box that you used to hold. You come back and there's those, okay, this is where I used to do this, and this is who I used to hang out with and whatever. And then it's almost kind of like this reset where you're like, like you were saying, these relationships you kind of just let kind of fall away, not for any other reason other than if I'm coming back, this is what I choose to have in my now, which is kind of it sounds cold, and I really don't mean it to, but hopefully every day we're striving to being better. And because we're building ourselves and our legacy, and, hopefully be able to pass that on to children someday, or even just friends, these gathered lessons and people that you're accruing in your life. But there's this amazing thing that comes with that reset is you can also reinvent yourself in this time. And, for as long as I've known you, you've been Breanna Riddell, worship leader, worship pastor. And it's so strange. And I'm experiencing this in my own life. When you do something for so long that you almost let it become part of your identity, part of your title. You're no longer just Breanna Riddell, human. You're Breanna Riddell, worship leader. That's part of your everyday. And so when you come to this season where something that you've done for so long, you've put on a shelf, or at least put on the every so often shelf. It's not in your, regular playlist of life. How's that been in your life? I know it's just such a silly question. There's probably a more eloquent way of putting that, but how have you approached the shift of setting your main thing to the side?
Sure. I am still going through that journey, and it's bigger than me being a worship leader. It's the church as a whole. I have struggled more deeply than I ever have before with the church and the purpose of the church and God's involvement in the church. When I moved home last year, I did not touch or pick up a worship instrument. Well, I play guitar, but I didn't play worship for almost a year. I did maybe one or two little small events when people found out I was in town, but for the most part, I did not do anything for 365 days. I didn't even go to church when I moved home for the first, couple months at least. And I'm not saying, for anyone who's listening and trying to find justification for not going to church, that is not what I'm saying. Church is important, and I'm currently going to church. But what I am saying is that I think it's okay to wrestle. And in that wrestling, I think it's okay to slip out and not be judged for it. I think we do a bad job of judging people if they don't go to church every Sunday. And I think church is important. It needs to be a priority, but I also think you get the freedom in life to struggle with what you believe is true. So I have been doing that, and I would definitely say I'm on the healthier side of that. But yeah, like pretty much my whole life since I've been 15, I'm 27. So 12 years of my life, I was known as the worship leader or the church girl or some version of that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And very much so, my relationship with God has been intertwined in that, both the good and the bad parts of that. You know, I think the good parts of that being that I've always been protected and I've always been able to really flourish in my relationship with God in a safe way. The bad part of that being that I feel condemnation and judgment and shame when I don't live up to this perfect standard. And so, you know, coming out of kind of where I did, I struggled a lot with the shame and the judgment and the false sense of guilt, and felt terrible about myself, about the church, about God, about my ability to even lead worship. And this, I moved home without a job. And I will say one thing about God is that God is the giver of good gifts. And that's something I always forget about. I always think of God as like this God who like judges. And once again, I feel like that's a pretty big indication of the church sometimes, but God is a giver of good gifts. You know, my friend Rachel always reminds me of that. He loves to give you good gifts, Breanna. And one great example of that is my job. And the reason why this story is important is because I think God was giving me almost like the okay to leave ministry. Like I felt like he was telling me, Breanna, like, I don't love you any less if you're not a worship leader. If you never sing another note in church, I will still love you just as much. And to show you that, I'm going to give you this job that you don't even know that you want, but is exactly perfect for what you need. And he gave me this job. And it is literally like some days, maybe it's not exactly like the most thriving and like passion-filled job like church was, but it is the perfect job for the season that I'm in. And it's just a welcoming, encouraging environment. And it's really easy. It's not stressful. And he gave me that. You know, I didn't go looking for it. He handed it to me. And I think, you know, my point in saying that is like, yeah, I struggle with my identity. I still do. But I know that God doesn't. God has never once struggled with who I am. He doesn't think I'm Breanna Riddell, the worship leader. He thinks I'm Breanna Riddell, the beautiful daughter that he made. It's me that has the problem. You know, it's me that can't remember that. Yeah. And so, yeah, I work part-time at a church now. That happened also from God. It's a 50-person church in the middle of East Milton, Florida. It is the last place on earth I thought I'd ever be. But it is the most, in my opinion, the most biblical form of church I've seen in a while. And it's life-giving to me. And that's the only reason I'm there. You know, I'm not there because I want to be in ministry or I feel called to do it right now. I'm there because it is a source of comfort. And I think it is exactly what I need. I know that was long-winded. There's a lot of
it's good
components to it, but.
Yeah. And I want to break it down a little bit if we can.
Sure.
Or I mean, you're here. Where are you going? So first of all, I agree. I think, unfortunately, depending on where you come from, your perspective of church is going to be very different. And then everybody in that church is going to have a very different perspective. And growing up as we did in the South, you know, if you do, like you're saying, if you miss a Sunday or you stop going, like it's just this taboo, horrible thing. I think, unfortunately, you know, the Bible is true. Not unfortunately, the Bible is. Let me put a pin there. The Bible is true and everything in it, I believe. I agree that it's, you know, it is the word of God. But I feel as humans, we are faulted and we take these things out of context, or we use them, we weaponize them against fellow believers, which is horrendous. But, you know, there's the scripture that people want to use as, you know, like, do not forsake in the gathering of fellow believers as, you know, the heathens have, and that sort of deal, which is true. Like Breanna said, you know, it's important to gather. You know, it's where we build one another up and we encourage each other and keep each other accountable. However, the guilt that comes with having a season of rest, having a Sabbath, extended Sabbath, or a Selah is very important. You know, Moses went to the mountaintop. Yes, he met with God, but you can also meet with God in this time. I'm not saying that's a get out of jail free card to just, I'm done with church and I'm taking my rest. Be intentional in that time.
Absolutely.
seek God, have one-on-one time. If you need to remove yourself, if you are on staff or if you're serving and it has become more than a chore, than a service of love and joy, then stop, because you're not doing it from the right place. You're not doing it with a good heart. You're not bringing the Lord your first and your best fruits. So take that time to reestablish. I applaud you for doing such. When I stepped down from my leadership position at the church that I was on staff with recently, I gave myself a month to just sit and process. And I'm coming to the end of a 6-month stretch of having not played in any sort of, worship band or whatever. I'm getting to that point where I'm really, really missing it. But I needed that time to let it be a joy again, to be something that I'm craving, not for being on stage, but to pour out of the gifts and talents that God has given me, to give back to him, to worship him, to love on him, and not just be oh, good grief, I have to get up and go do this again. I really don't want to. I'm just being perfectly honest.
Yeah, and people are going to take whatever I say the way they're going to say it. I'm just going to say what I feel like God has been teaching me. And if you're listening to this and you're mad about what I'm saying, then you can just, I don't know, turn it off. I don't know. I will say, I have learned a lot about the people of God in the last couple of seasons of my life. I've learned about the people that I can tell truly, genuinely, not only love God, but love me. And I can tell which people liked the idea of me, and I can tell which people never liked me at all. And I don't really, good. I don't care, I don't need 700 friends. That just seems overwhelming and really exhausting. The people that I have in my life are intentionally there because they have seen me and walked through things with me. But I will say that the people of God don't always know how to love other people well, even in their own circles.
Yeah.
And we look at the life of Jesus, and all he did when people were broken was go straight to where they were and meet them there, and I feel like that's what God has done to me. And that's what God does to anybody who's broken. He goes and he meets you there. He doesn't say, hey, go get dressed up and go to church, and then I'll talk to you at church. He doesn't say hey, I need you, we were going to repent and all this stuff. But he doesn't say, hey, I need you to fix everything first, and then I'll talk to you. He says, no, I love you right now. I will meet you where you are right now. And, it's been very eye-opening to see that, there are really good people that love Jesus and love his people. And those are the people, whether there's one of them or 30 of them, it doesn't matter. But those are the people that I will surround myself with in these seasons of brokenness, in these seasons of, I don't know who I am, I'm struggling with my identity, because those people never defined me by my ability to lead worship anyway. And those are the people that I need right now in my life.
I think, unfortunately, you said it, and I agree. We, as Christians, oftentimes do a very poor job of actually being Christian, being Christ-like. I think, and you've heard me say this before, we as the church, we have identity crisis. We oftentimes forget who we are in him. I think we all know we need to walk around with those hello, I am name tags but it just says child of God. I am, hello, I am, Jesus is. Because I think if we saw that and go, oh, this is who I am, then this tells me who I should be like, how I should love. Maybe this person is the most radically different being than I am. Their political preferences, their sexual orientation, their background, their financial status, I don't care. Be kind. Go love them. You don't have to agree. Nowhere. I dare you, find me the place in the Bible where it says, go and agree and then you shall love. No, it just says go and love. Go be Jesus to them. We're called to be different. We're called to be set apart. Just be cool, people. Just go love each other. You don't have to like everything they're doing. Just go be kind. And again, this goes back to this feeling of being judged, this feeling of that my way that I'm figuring it out, I'm walking out my salvation. It doesn't look like that person's. And suddenly we feel so self-conscious. instead of just going, this is the path that I'm taking. It doesn't look maybe as pretty as that person's, or thank God it's not as difficult as theirs, but you just got to keep cruising on and find those people, like you're saying, that are going to be down in the trenches with you. Those people that are going to be there to pull you up out of the mud. And sometimes those people will just say, you know what, I'm just going to sit down in the mud with you because this is just what we need to do today. And that's all right.
Yeah. And I think it also is challenging me to be, like these people see me the way God sees me. Okay. That's challenging me to see myself the way that God sees me, and also see other people the way that God sees them. I think it's like wildfire, right? Like, I know that's a super, super cheesy metaphor, but like joy is contagious, right? Like, we know this, that's why the gospel is so effective, because it's just full of joy and hope. And joy and hope are contagious, and not just for the non-believer, but also for the believer, who needs to be reminded daily that there is a battle that has already been won, and there's joy to be had. And so that stuff's contagious. And man, I would rather spend my days with the people who are full of joy than the days of people who think that they have all of the answers, or think that they know the right way or the wrong way or whatever. Like, who God is who I'm interested in being more like, not who other people are. And that's a hard lesson to learn at any stage of life. And it's even harder to learn when you're going through already hard stuff, but I think that's just usually when you learn it the best.
Well, you just made me think of something. You just said that these people see you the way that God sees you, which makes you realize that you need to see others the way that God sees them. And I think we're so critical of ourselves. We're our worst critic, you know what I mean? And so I think oftentimes we place these assumptions on God. Like, this is how God views me, or this is what, like you're saying, we just think, oh, he's being judgmental, or that we don't see him as loving sometimes, or we see, and then unfortunately we take those fears and those self-conscious things that we place on ourselves on others. And then it's again, we need to realize that we're not seeing them the way that God sees them. We're putting on this weird lens of, I'm seeing them how I think God sees me. And it's this weird, super toxic, unhealthy viewpoint that we just need to pull back and realize that we are human. We are faulted, as are they. And again, we're all just trying our best. And if we just go about it as, they're trying their best, I'm trying my best, how can I be better for them? How can I see them where they are? And in the same way that Jesus comes to us in the middle of our blech, that we can go to them in the middle of their blech and just say, hey, how can I help? Or I'm here. It's a very simple thing, but I think sometimes that's the thing that we need, and we need to be for other people.
I agree. I definitely agree.
Breanna, question for you.
Yes.
What do you want your legacy to be when the final note is strummed on that guitar of yours, when the last note is sang and the lights go dim and it's time for you to leave this side of heaven and enter into that? What do you want your legacy to be?
My answer's changed a lot as I've gotten older, which sounds like a very old person thing to say, by the way. Like, when did we get old enough to even have that as a saying that we can say?
Listen, I quote Nick Miller, who said, I like getting older. I'm just finally aging into my personality.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. When I was a little bit younger, I just really cared so much about making it big, having this big, dramatic, kind of purposeful, important life. I'm a 4 on the Enneagram scale. I don't know if you care about that, but I do. And I'm a 4, we're really moody and like want to be different, whatever. It's annoying. And that really, like, that kind of that high or that opportunity or that like potential opportunity in life kind of chased me for a while. And, now I just want to be a faithful follower of God. And I'm in a season right now where I'm really struggling with what that looks like. And I have been through a lot of mental breakdowns and like a lot of hard conversations with God, and a lot of seasons of I don't even want to talk to you, God. But he always just calls me back. He's just so sweet and good about that. He just like calls to my heart, and I just like, I want to be faithful, and I want to do whatever he wants me to do. And even when I mess up, I want another chance. I'm always praying to God, like, God, I don't know what to say to you. I can't really talk to you right now, but like, just don't give up on me. Like, I know that I'm coming. Just don't give up on me. Like, that's what I say to him all the time. Like, I want to do what he wants me to do. And if he takes me to really cool, extravagant places like Denver, Colorado, that'd be freaking awesome. And and if I stay in Pensacola, Florida the rest of my life and deal with this unbearable humidity, that'll be okay too, I guess.
Orlando has cross
I can
freezes.
wear my
that's all I'm
beanies or my
saying.
turtlenecks, but but I don't need a law anymore. I don't. And I think that's probably where God wanted me to be, 10 years ago. But, I'm a little bit of a slow learner. So here I am now. And, and it goes so much greater than like, even like my job. I'm not even married yet and I don't have kids yet. Like, who cares? Who cares? Like, people stop asking me when I'm getting married. Who cares? Like, that has not been my story yet. And that's fine. And I'm happy because God has me, I believe, where he wants me. And that's just enough, and I want to believe that. I can say that to you, but I also want to believe it. And that's the part I'm working towards. So.
Okay. So finding your legacy will be that she wanted big, but she was also content with where she was.
Yeah, my legacy is being content with whatever God wants. Like actually content, like happy, fulfilled in the mundane as much as the big.
That's good. I mean, how many of us can just sit where we are and if you know that it's where God has you to be, like, I'm at peace, it is well. It's really good. That
hymn has meant more to me, I think, over the last couple of months than it ever has before. I mean, granted, my family didn't die at sea or anything crazy like that, but it's still, the sentiment still holds true. It is well with my soul.
I love that. Breanna, thank you so much for coming back and hanging out. And hopefully the next time we have you back that there's like new and exciting news, or even if there's not, we just got to come back and chat and just maybe we can just tell old band stories from our years of doing all kinds of ridiculous things at so many different places. At
Corey Jess's house.
Yeah.
Pizza like every night.
Yeah. Whataburger. Number 7, just lettuce, mustard, and cheese.
You got it.
Shout out to Whataburger.
For having me. Shout out to Whataburger. Thanks for having me again. And, I really appreciate it. So
you bet.
Well, that's all for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Once again, I'd like to thank our guest, Breanna Riddell, for her authenticity and insight. I'm Zach Brown, and I want you to remember, your story may be the inspiration someone else needs. So keep going. Have a good one.